Oh shit, didn't see you there. Yeah, I'm sad. I guess lonely out here in space, on this convincing spaceship. But now you're here. We can keep each other company. Who am I? Why listen to me? I've been a heavy consumer of media pretty much my whole life. Video games, movies. I was a big Sega kid. First console was Sega Genesis. Got a Game Gear. And then I got a Sega CD. And then I think I got N64 after that. Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color as well. I started phasing more into Nintendo at that point. I got a Nintendo GameCube, Sega Dreamcast. Halo got me into Xbox. GTA Vice City got me into PlayStation 2. And I've kept up with pretty much all the companies since then. And now I feel like I'm phasing into PC gaming now overall. But I've played a lot of stuff. I know a lot about games, how they're made. The history of consoles, their specs. I know computers, how to build them, take them apart. I have programming experience. I've made games and ActionScript. I've done a bit of Java programming, some HTML. Watched a lot of movies, a lot of television, a lot of sitcoms. British mainly at first, then American, then around the world. I was never really like a popular music guy. I don't know much about bands, band history, but I always really liked film scores. I would listen to them over and over, and I was trying to use that music as a bouncing board to like daydream and conjure narratives in my head, which is why I guess I eventually gravitated towards screenwriting. I used to write stupid short stories and draw comics and doodle when I was a kid, and I made stupid movies with my tape camcorder at the time, like some start animation, like Lego movies, stuff like that. I worked in a supermarket for a few years, so I got some sales experience. After I graduated high school, I had an incident where I tore a bunch of ligaments in one of my ankles, and I was chair-bound for a few months, like several months, I think. And I obviously spent most of that time on my ass and on my computer and surfing the net and learning about all this niche stuff on the internet, like not that YouTube's niche, but stuff like YTMND as well, and Newgrounds. Newgrounds isn't really niche anymore either. I don't know if I'm using that word right. Just these little odd little places in the corners of the internet where people would make this weird content, and I was fascinated by that, and I wanted to understand it, what motivated these people and why it was funny exactly. Why some of these like YTMNDs and stuff had this weird, like a strange magic to them. And I was finding different kinds of forums and studying different cultures and subcultures on the internet and memes, internet jargon. And I was also studying computers at the time. I was still in high school, but it was university level courses they were offering, like Cisco network certification training, A+ certification. I did all the studying for it. I just didn't take the exams because they wanted money to take it, and I was like, fuck that. But now I kind of wish I did, but I don't want to take the test, especially now, because I feel like information technology standards have evolved so much that all my knowledge is probably out of date by now, because we're on this like upswing of technology where the evolution of it is accelerating and nobody can keep up. Kind of sucks. I'm a film school graduate, if anybody gives a fuck. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Motion Picture Production. I went to school for 4 years. I've worked on film sets, amateur and professional, across every position from PAing to grip to electrics to assistant direction. I've done student films, television shows. I initially went to college for game design, but I was really bored by the courses. Like it was mandatory to take this fundamentals of computing class, and I had already taken much harder courses in high school before I left. So, but it's like I had to do this course anyway. I'm just like, this sucks. Like, I don't think I could use the credits that I earned in those high school courses. I don't think they applied to the game design course I was taking. And that was really frustrating because I'm just like, I know all this crap. This is like too basic for me now, but I have to attend and pay for it anyway. So I was losing patience with it, but I ultimately stopped because around that time I had been contacted by machinima.com, which was a very small company at the time in Los Angeles, and they were looking for content creators. And I had made this video called Master Chief Sucks at Halo that went viral on YouTube at the time. I think this was 2008, and it got millions of views. I made a second one that got a lot of views as well, and that got the attention of Machinima. They contacted me and they said, hey, we'll pay you to keep doing what you're doing. And I was like, cool. And I quit college for a while to focus on that. But that's a whole thing. I don't work for them anymore because they don't exist anymore, and I'm just working on my own channel now. I did post my Master Chief Sucks at Halo videos to my channel initially, but once I started working for Machinima, all my videos were being uploaded to their channel, and my channel I was neglecting. And I neglected it all that time while I was working for Machinima for years, several years at least. And now I'm just trying to start from where I left off with my own channel and trying to rebuild it, and just I appreciate my independence now as a content creator that I didn't before. And that was a valuable lesson learned, I guess. Oh yeah, so it was the show Arby and the Chief that I made for Machinima when I started working for them. And that went on under Machinima for 7 seasons, and then I stopped working for them. And I started working on season 8 on my own channel. But the way things have worked out, now everything is on my channel. And now I want to try something new. And this is my new show. My groundbreaking new show. Okay? Get this, you guys. Are you sitting down? The show is, I'm a 30-something man-child who sits in front of a camera and a microphone and talks about media. Are you excited? Don't all shit and come in your pants all at once. Control yourselves, because I don't think there's enough of these kinds of shows on YouTube. You know? I was wondering what to call this show, and I thought the angry, suicidal, depressed, bipolar, violent, borderline personality, psychotic, deranged, suicidal gamer. I've noticed a certain theme on YouTube, and I'm just throwing in my contribution. But I eventually decided on Mediabyss, and I came up with this whole thing of being on a spaceship. And I talk about media, so media, Mediabyss, all one word, but abyss is in there because not only is there basically an abyss of media because it's an oversaturated market, but we're also in space. So that's the very clever joke. My content has usually been narrative-based. I like to write stories. And I've done this sort of thing before where, in a way, where like I'll critique media or something, but I've always done it, I think up until now, through like a satirical persona, where like I'm playing a character and I'm making fun of something in a subversive way. But I wanted to just try a show where I speak candidly about things that interest me. I want it to be media focused. Could be games, could be movies. And I just pick something out of one or the other that isn't necessarily good or bad, just something. I might hate it, but if there's something like interesting about it to talk about, I might make an episode about that thing. I'm designing this show so I'm not locked into any kind of way of doing it. It can be about any piece of media of any type. The video can be of any length, and there's not a pressure to constantly have rapid fire jokes, which is always how I've written stuff, because I've kept up that kind of content for so long that I'm always kind of worried about underperforming for viewers. Like there won't be enough jokes in it. I always try to like maximize that. So this is something new. It may not be your thing. If you don't like it, you don't have to watch. Believe it or not, you don't have a gun to your head, is what I'm trying to say. Or maybe you do. Chick. My, how the turntables. I don't know how long the video is going to be at this point of recording, but you're stuck here with me, okay? You're going to watch the whole thing, You're not going to fast forward. You're not going to pause. You're not going to get up to go to the bathroom. No food breaks. You're going to watch the whole fucking thing, or I'm going to blow your ass off. I also wanted this to have a conversational feel and not scripted. There's a lot of video essayists that I watch who clearly they write all their stuff out and they just say it as written in front of a microphone. They don't really do the on-camera thing, not all of them. I'm specifically setting out to do a show where it feels like we're just hanging out on this spaceship. Like part of the show is the aesthetic. I want to make you feel like you're on a spaceship in space with me, okay? It's just you and me out here hanging out. If you listen carefully, you can hear the buzzing of the tape that this is recorded on, and also the rumble of like the ship traveling through space really low across this. It's louder whenever we cut to outside the ship, but inside the volume's lowered, but it's still there. And I'm trying to pull you into a worlds, experiences, okay? The media we talk about could also be from any era, you know? It could be a movie from the 80s, it could be a video game from the 90s, or it could be a video game or a movie that just came out, or it could be like about a trailer that came out, or maybe some kind of press event. I want these episodes to each revolve around anything media related, and if you have any ideas, I encourage you to write a comment saying what you would like to see talked about on the show. And if there's something I can find in the suggestions that has something that I can relate to or find interesting to talk about, then I'll consider that and maybe make an episode about it. I already have a list written of potential future episode topics, but I'm always happy to hear more in the comments. And each episode I could be singing the praises of something solely, or just solely critiquing something, or a bit of both. Like I said, I don't want to lock myself into any kind of style or delivery. I want to keep it loose and enjoyable and candid and conversational and hopefully funny. As you can see, I'm trying a different audio recording method now. I thought I'd go the dynamic microphone route, see how that goes. A lot of the microphones that you'll see podcasters using are condenser microphones, and they work differently. They need power from somewhere. Could be a computer, could be an outlet. Dynamic microphones, they do not need power. I'm probably getting this wrong, but I think they generate the electricity they need by the sound waves actually hitting the components inside. And all you need to do is plug an XLR cable into it and it'll work. And they have such a narrow range relative to condenser microphones that I don't have to worry about any background noises or bumps from elsewhere in the house or noises. Pretty much all it records is what's directly right here. Not only that, but I want to kind of treat this almost like stand-up, except without jokes. Isn't that exciting? I think there's also something kind of like psychological about holding a microphone in your hand and having the piece right in front of your mouth where like it helps you focus your voice more and think a little harder about what it is you're trying to say. Plus, there's just something about double-handing a cylindrical shaped object right in front of your mouth. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is, but I just love it. I'm not really known as a media critic person, so I've got work to do in that area, and I'm probably gonna contradict myself a bunch of times in each episode, and I'm gonna get shit wrong. I acknowledge all that, and I want to do this in a way where I'm not talking down to anybody. I'm not lecturing you. Like, I have a lot of experience in media consumption and creating media. Like, I've written screenplays for like 10 years. I've programmed video games. I think I know what I'm talking about, and I do know a lot of stuff, but I'm gonna get shit wrong, and I always see myself in a state of learning, and if I get shit wrong, like I said, I encourage you to leave a comment and let me know what you think, because on one hand, this show is meant to be like a throwback to the television on the 90s that I used to watch, shows like Video and Arcade Top 10. But I also want to incorporate the new that is good about media, like the widescreen format. You see it starts off in 4:3 and the bars go away. and community engagement as well on YouTube. I enjoy reading comments, and I'm interested in what you have to say. But if you do disagree with me and you want to say why, I would appreciate it if you substantiated it with like some points to consider. Because if you just say you're wrong and throw in an insult, I'm not really interested, to be honest. So yeah, I'm trying something new. I want to make the show that I've been creatively driven to make, and I don't want to be locked into any method of making the video. I don't want to make it certain lengths just because of like YouTube's algorithm or whatever. Fuck YouTube's algorithm, okay? It's changing every day probably. Who the fuck knows what it is today? Who knows what it wants? It's like some beast that you keep somewhere and you have to feed it a different animal each day because its tastes keep changing. I've watched a lot of content like this on YouTube. Most of it, I think, is lacking in one way or another. But there's other people who do this sort of thing who I really enjoy. And both sides of that have made me think like, hey, I think I can contribute to this. So I know there's a billion other ones like this show, but here's mine, okay? Here's my dog shit show. I hope you like it. So to get to it, the media we'll be talking about today is the Halo television series, which I think a lot of people who follow me are interested in my thoughts on, me having been intertwined with the Halo franchise for a significant portion of my life. I started making machinima movies with Halo 2 and Halo 3 and then Halo Reach, and I'm still using Halo Reach now because I feel like it's still better than all the other methods, all the other games that have that functionality. And I'm obviously a huge fan of the Halo games, starting with Halo 1 on the Xbox. Is the reason I got into Xbox. I got noticed by Bungie in regard to my first 2 Arby and the Chief episodes, and I interacted with some of the staff. I've played most of the games. I haven't played Halo Wars. I think that's the only one I haven't. Well, Halo Wars 1 and 2, just because I'm not really an RTS guy. I'm trying to get into that, though. I got Civilization. We'll see how I do with that. But anyway, I've obviously made something of a Halo series on my own with Master Chief Sucks at Halo and Arby and the Chief, and people are naturally curious what I think of the Halo television series. I know I'm a little behind on this. Halo's been out for a while, but I hope this commentary is still welcome. And spoilers ahead. Let's get started. So the story is there's an interstellar war between humans and the Covenant, which are like a conglomerate of alien races that are all kind of unified in the destruction of humans, at least. And humans and Covenant are looking for artifacts, the same artifacts that lead to this thing called Halo, which is this weapon of universal destruction. And they're each trying to get to it first in order to eradicate the other side and win the war. We start off on this outpost on the planet Madrigal, and we see the humans in the outpost, and they're kind of playing cards and chatting about stuff. They mention the Spartans. It's funny, I feel like ever since Force Awakens, there's this thing now where, like, because in that movie there's this scene where Han Solo gets pinned down by these gangs that like he owes them money or something, and there's the Asian dudes from the raid and then this Scottish guy. And I feel like since then, if you want to have this beat of like multi-ethnicity, multiculturalism, in the same room you have to have an Asian guy and a Scottish guy. We get introduced to Quan with her friends out in the woods, and the dialogue is kind of dumb because it's like over expository, and Quan is saying things to her friends that they probably would have already discussed, or like she wouldn't need to tell her friends because they would know already. And it's like obviously just telling the audience that the planet is rich in heavy hydrogen, deuterium. It's these particles that have extra hydrogen molecules, I guess, and that makes it able to be used as fuel. And so it's like the thing in the Halo universe, at least in season 1, that everyone's trying to get at, right? Because it's valuable. This is a nitpick, but I find Quan's space mullet a little too distracting. I was impressed by the force of the Covenant plasma fire, because when the Covenant come in and attack, you don't see the aliens right away. You just see like their plasma hitting the kids that Quan is out with. And there's actually quite an impact. It's pretty brutal. Like, there's kids get like vaporized from the waist up and have their limbs blown off. It's actually pretty gnarly. I wasn't expecting it to be that hard hitting right out the gate, so I give it points for that. But throughout the season, it's not very consistent with the force of the plasma fire. Like, in later episodes, there's plasma that hits other stuff, and the impact doesn't seem nearly as forceful as it did in the beginning, so that kind of sucks me out of it. I'm a fan of the production design overall. The armor on everybody looks good. The game props, like, there's a lot of stuff you'll recognize from the video games, and they do a good job replicating it all. I like the environments. I like the kind of minimalist futurism, clean look that they're going for in like the sci-fi looking areas, like the UNSC lab and stuff. They use sounds from the video games, which is cool. Like, you know, when the Spartan shields recharge, or that one elite is like running away and he uses his cloaking device. The CGI is a bit hit or miss. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's like PlayStation 2 cutscene. Halo the television series, only on PlayStation 2. Whoa. Whenever there's action in this season, I find it pretty, like, at least fun and watchable. There's a lot of creative beats with, like, recognizable enemies from the games using weapons in creative ways. Like, there's a jackal with an energy sword that, like, runs out of a Covenant dropship and just starts slashing away at UNSC dudes. And, like, elites using their swords in creative ways, like through doors, or just melting somebody's chest without like moving the blade, which you would think would happen a lot more often in Star Wars with the lightsabers, right? So actually, I like that Halo is doing the thing that Star Wars isn't, which would make sense. You know, instead of using lightsabers always like a sword and swinging it like a sword, you can literally just like stab anybody with a lightsaber and just wiggle it around and it'll burn right through them, right? Like, what is even the point a lot of the time of like the actual sword art? You know what I mean? The Covenant are like supposed to be scary, and in some ways they actually do kind of achieve that effect in the opening scene, really, and that's it, because we don't see much of the aliens in combat otherwise, except a bit in episode 5 and a bit in the finale. But the show's largely devoid of aliens, unfortunately. But whenever the elites do this thing, like they do battle cries, like they'll see a human and they'll stop for a minute and go like, roar, which is from the games, fair enough. But in television, it's just like when I see them do that, like I think it's different for a video game because it gives you time as a player to like reload and like take aim. Like it's a point in a video game where the enemy is like tired and you have an opportunity, or not tired in this case, but like stationary, where you have like a window of time deliberately given to you by the developers to like attack the enemy and land a few headshots. In the show, it's like, don't let your guard down. You know what I mean? You're in this combat zone. A human with a gun could be anywhere behind cover watching you right now, and if you're taking a moment as an alien to like stand still and go roar, and like lifting your head up in plain view of like somebody to headshot you, like, why take the risk? That it comes off as kind of stupid and makes the aliens less threatening. So Covenant's attacking the humans, and the humans are getting fucking owned, and seems like all hope is lost. And then that's when the Pelican's in the sky, and the robot we all know and love, known as John Halo, lands down and has an epic reveal. Little camera push in. The robot John Halo, who is a robot like Sirius Samus. I'm a little on the fence about Pablo Schreiber as Master Chief, I got no gripes with the actor. I've seen behind the scenes footage and interviews with him, and he seems like a perfectly nice dude, like really affable, just really pleasant and natural on camera when he's just having a candid conversation. And I think he's quite good in the suit. Like, he's a good physical actor, and I don't think it can be easy moving around and doing action scenes in a suit like that. I mean, they probably designed it in a way where, you know, it's not rigid like the old Batman suit used to be in like the Michael Keaton movies. Like, they probably engineered the John Halo's suit to be, you know, all the joints are really flexible. Like, you want it so Pablo can really move around in that thing. But even if the suit is designed with that kind of flexibility, it's probably still difficult to some degree to doing all that action in a suit, especially with a helmet on. Like, it's probably hot and is stiff to some degree. I think he's very good in the suit for the combat scenes. His performance, I don't want to say it's bad, but you have to wonder the kind of direction that he's being given, how that information is filtering through his brain based on his interpretation of the character. Because I do wonder, based on what's been said in interviews and stuff, like, how much do these people involved in the production of the show really know about the games and the characters? Maybe they know more than I'm giving them credit for. But I think whatever the case, it's getting somebody to play Master Chief. I think it's a difficult role to play, you know, because, like, first of all, what are you doing with the character? And, like, what is Master Chief in the games? What I've always liked about Chief is that he stands out to me in being almost like Doom Guy, but not quite. I think Master Chief and Doom Guy have this overlap where they function as shells for the player to occupy. And there's an obvious game-related reason for that, right, in the games, because you want to feel like Master Chief. That's part of the intent. But when you're doing a television show, you've got to take a different approach, right? Do you just make Chief a shell again, even though, you know, the player dynamic isn't a part of the equation anymore? So it makes sense to give Chief more character than perhaps he has in the games. Not that he didn't have character, which I think is an important thing the showrunners are neglecting. And that's what sets him apart from Doom Guy. And that's kind of what is unique about him to me, is that he does that Doom Guy function, but he's also got a bit of substance there that makes Chief who he is. Like, he's a moral person. Like, he knows what's right and wrong, always tries to do the right thing, very quick thinking, tactical thinker, thinks outside the box, has kind of a tongue-in-cheek, there's a cheekiness to his antics against the Covenant, where, like, he'll get a bold idea that everyone will think is crazy, but not only is he willing to do it, but Cortana will be on board with it as well. And that's one of the things about their dynamic that I really like in the video games. And there's, like, bits and pieces of that in the show, in the finale in particular, but there's just so few instances of it that it's disappointing. What was I trying to say? Fuck. In the show, you have to wonder, like, what's the showrunners and the director's understanding of this character? Are they thinking, like, because you got to give, if we're doing Master Chief in television, right, the inclination is obviously to give him an arc, because that's what you do in television with characters. You have them in state A, and across the course of a season or multiple seasons, you put them into state B. They evolve, right? And so what's the A and B of Chief? And so it makes sense to have it start off with him as basically a droid for the UNSC's goals, and he discovers his humanity as the show goes on. And credit to the showrunners, I think they said exactly that. That was their intent with the character. But I'm not really sure they did that, Because they do kind of start him off as this, like, he's just an effective war machine. That's the initial impression that you get of Chief in the opening scene, right? And then he does go on this journey of, like, you know, discovering his humanity when he takes the chip out of his ass. But then at the very end, it takes this huge leap back because Cortana, spoilers again, completely overwrites Chief's brain. And you're meant to think at the end of season 1 that there's nothing left of Chief's humanity and he's just all Cortana, all computer. Doesn't even say anything. He just, like, does whatever he's programmed to do, and that's it. So he, like, had a smidgen of humanity at the beginning. His journey was supposed to be he finds his humanity, but he ends up losing it all in the very end. But it is trying to do something thematically there with the cost of humanity on the individual level when you're trying to win an existential war with a threat like the Covenant, right? If you could turn everyone into a robot like Chief is at the end of season 1, because he's like all Cortana. I'm not even saying that as a joke. He literally is a computer, a robot. If the UNSC could do that to every one of their soldiers, right, and then win the war as a result, and the Covenant's defeated, you've won the battle against the Covenant, but can you really call that a victory? Because you've robbed everyone of their humanity, their autonomy, their individualism, what makes them them. They're just the sort of hive mind of robotic fighters. And it's like, victory has come at what cost? The thing we were trying to save is basically gone. So that introduces these ideas of morality in war. Is there a right way to win? Is there a wrong way to win? Are there rules of war? What are the rules of engagement? Should there be rules of engagement, or is it just the ends justify the means? These are interesting questions, right? And they are good themes to have that aren't unique to the show. Halo has always had these themes, I think, and the books went into them a little deeper than the games do, but they're there in the games as well. Halo to me has always been like a intergalactic cautionary tale, basically, of like refraining from meddling with things that are beyond your understanding, or if you're going to, at least take extreme caution in doing so. And is war the answer, right? Because, I mean, in the first game, in Halo Combat Evolved, the Covenant were kind of treated as the enemy, basically. They're just the bad guys that you shoot. But in Halo 2, it really started fleshing out the alien side of it. And if you can have a race of aliens that produces an individual like the Arbiter, who is actually this really respectable fighter with these respectable values, and he discovers that he has this overlap with Chief and humanity broadly, where they have shared interests in life and nobility and fighting with honor, that sort of thing. If an individual like that can manifest on the Covenant side, and an individual like Master Chief can manifest on the human side of things and come together and find that they have things in common, maybe this broad combat between both sides isn't the answer. Maybe the ultimate answer of Halo is for the races to come together, and that's basically like what Halo 2 does, because Master Chief and the Arbiter end up working together to stop the greater threat, which is the Flood, the Gravemind, or whatever. If you can even call Gravemind a bad guy, because he's just, as he says, a monument to all of humanity's sin. So Halo's always been really interesting to me, beyond just being a very effective, functional first-person shooter that plays really well. It's just it's solid storytelling with respectable, big themes. And it's a cool action sci-fi with these cool religious allegories and references. Like, I like how it tries to bring religion and science together in the context of a cool, straightforward action sci-fi thriller. Anyway, we got a bit sidetracked there. I got all the way into the theme of this. I was supposed to wait until later. This is for that. This is going to happen a lot, okay, where I just go off on tangents, and I'm going to try and Like, I wrote a whole bullet point list that I revised a shitload of times, and I'm going to use that to try and keep myself on track, but I'm also going to allow myself to go on tangents if it feels organic to the conversation. So bear with me. I may get sidetracked occasionally. Back to Pablo and his performance. Like I was saying, the director probably has his own idea of like what Master Chief is, and it's like, with that arc in mind, it's like, how do you tell Pablo as a director to play this character? It's like, you got to be emotionally muted because you're just basically kind of a robot at this point, and you're going to discover your humanity later. So don't make it too campy like RoboCop, where you're like, zzz, 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 I am Master Chief. Zzz.
Let the woman go. You are under arrest.
Don't do that, but don't like get too emotional or really emotional at all about anything. Not until later. And then what's Pablo doing with that information, and how's he like deciphering that into a performance that people are going to like? Because if it's too robotic, then the audience might not like the character as much. So there's just a lot to keep in mind when you're playing a role like that, and I just imagine it must have been tough for him. And I think he has a tendency to overact sometimes. Like, he does this The Rock type thing with his eyebrows sometimes. Sometimes he's doing a little too much with his face and his performance, where you can tell that he's very aware of the camera's presence. And as an actor, I feel you got to try and resist that more. It doesn't come off as natural enough to me, unfortunately. But there are beats where it does, and he does quite a good job. There is a scene where Pablo is with, Chief is with Halsey on the balcony of his old house, and this is like right after Chief sees Halsey in a past vision and figures out that Halsey was with him since childhood, and that he knows now that she's been lying to him. And Pablo is genuinely confused and hurt, and he has this line delivery with Halsey that he plays with a genuine sense of hurt and confusion. So he does that quite well. So I wonder if it's really overacting or bad performance sometimes, or if it just comes down to bad direction, because the showrunners and the writers don't really know what they're doing with the character at each like beat. I don't know. It's hard to say. But I do like Pablo overall. I think there's some room for improvement, but he's not a bad pick for Master Chief. I mean, because you can't... Steve Downes is great, right? His voice is like so good. Works perfectly for the games.
Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that ship?
Sir, finishing this fight.
But what are you going to do, right? Like, do a thing like with Darth Vader, where James Earl Jones does the voice, but you got someone else in the suit. Like, you can't have Steve Downes in the suit, and they obviously want to do this Halo show with Chief's helmet off for a large part of the time, and so obviously you can't have Steve Downes there. It'd probably be like, I mean, I don't know what shape Steve Downes is in. I mean, I think he looks fine for an old guy, but he is old. You know, it's a bit like, doesn't exactly map on, but you know that Family Guy bit where they get James Earl Jones to like wear the Darth Vader costume, and James Earl Jones is like a heavy guy, and his kind of fat is poking out of his seams of his suit, and the guys are like, crew are looking at him, and they're like,
"So James, we just want you to do the voice."
You can't even have Steve do the voice because it just wouldn't work, right, for that production. It would only work if Chief never took his helmet off, but obviously you can't do that. They don't want to do that in the show. And the actor probably doesn't want to do that either. I mean, I don't know if this is the case with Pablo, but I imagine there's shows where you have actors who sign contracts when they're playing helmeted characters, and it's written maybe into their contract, if I'm going to play this role, there needs to be X amount of screen time where I have the helmet off because I want people to see my face, right? So there'd be like a quota, a face quota, I guess. Like I said, I don't know if that's the case here with Halo, but I imagine to some degree that Pablo wants to be seen when he's playing this character. But there's times where it's appropriate to take the helmet off and sometimes not, and I feel like they take it off too often in the show because there's like beats where Chief will be in a combat zone and he takes the helmet off, and it's like, dude, you don't know if there's like enemies around that are armed that are going to use that opportunity to kill a Spartan who has just exposed themselves, and you can just have your brains blown out right there. I mean, why take the risk? Why not just keep the helmet on? Plus, you're getting, as a Spartan, all this diagnostic information through the helmet and its interface, right? So there's a tactical reason to always have it on, right? Unless it's like absolutely like downtime where you're on a passenger ship, you're being flown somewhere off planet or onto a spaceship where there's absolutely no threat around you. Then you can take the helmet off. But there's too many instances in the show where it's just like, it's impractical and stupid to take the helmet off right now. Don't do it. But they do it anyway because they want to do these like cool face reveal shots, and I don't know, it just sucks me out of it because it's dumb. The show does these first-person POV shots because I guess they feel obligated to do that sort of thing because this is a property that was originally a first-person shooter. So if we're making a television show off of a first-person shooter, you got to throw in a few first-person POV shots in there to satisfy the gamer audience. But personally, I'm part of the gamer audience, and I don't give a fuck about that. I'd rather they didn't do the helmet POVs, to be honest. I don't need for it to look like the game with the fucking HUD, That's not important to me. I'd rather you just kept the camera like out and just told the story. It makes sense for like what's his name? Iron Man, right? Because like Robert Downey Jr. has so much charisma, and you want to like keep an eye on that in terms of like camera placement while Iron Man's doing all his Iron Man things. But with the helmet POV shots looking out through the visor, we don't even see Pablo's face, so there's absolutely no real reason to have the gamer shots other than to like, based on this idea, I think a flawed idea of like making the gamer fans happy, and I just don't think you need to do that. Comes off as a little tacky to me, to be honest. Like, as a gamer, I guess I'm supposed to look at those POV shots and do the soy face, right? Oh my god, it's just like the video game! The first time we see the heads-up display on the helmet, it's orange. And I guess they've done this thing where the HUD is orange whenever the Spartan is in a combat state or an alert state where there may be a threat present, but the AI of the suit isn't certain, like, and nothing's on radar, but it's like, stay cautious, and the HUD will reflect that by being orange. But then I think when they're in a passive state where there's no threat, then it turns blue like the games. But in the games it was always blue. So like, why even take that step of like alienating the gamer? You're trying to please the gamer base already with the mere presence of helmet POV first-person shooter shots. Why make the HUD noticeably different in terms of color? Why not just keep it blue? Like, why even... does the Spartan really need to be reminded via color that they're in combat? I'm pretty sure they know. So I don't know why they didn't just keep it blue, because it looks like the games. There's this shot in the opening scene where it's like a POV through Chief again, and he's like about to shoot this alien in the head with his pistol, and there's like this weird little reticule that comes up. It's like not locked into the center of the frame like it would be in the games, but the cursor just kind of floats around and it just locks onto whatever. I get, maybe it's tracking Chief's pupils, like wherever he's looking, but I don't know, it just comes off as really stupid. There's this shot in the opening scene that everyone was baffled by at first when the pilot first premiered and before the finale came out, where like, or the penultimate episode rather, where Chief, I think he runs out of ammo in his assault rifle, but then that doesn't make sense. He throws his assault rifle away for some reason, and I don't think it was... you'd think if somebody throws away a gun after using it, it's because it runs out of bullets. But one, like, why wouldn't he just put it on his back, you know, save it for later? Why throw a perfectly good gun away? The gun can't be empty because the point of the rifle landing on the ground is because it gets used later. So presumably there's still some bullets left in it. But why would Chief throw away a gun with bullets in it? And so he throws the gun away, and it cuts to an insert shot where you see the gun landing on the ground, and it doesn't look very good, first of all, because like the CGI is a bit off. Like you can tell it's like superimposed, unnatural. And it baffled a lot of people because they were like, what does that mean? Why are we being shown this shot? What is it trying to convey? Is it just, I think most people thought like the showrunners were trying to say like, hey, look, it's the assault rifle from the games. Remember this? Remember this gun? Remember using this? And it was just like, why would you do that? But then in the penultimate episode, which we'll get to later, Quan is in a fight scene at the same location, and she finds the gun, and she uses it to like shoot a fuel tank, which kills a bunch of bad guys. And then at that point, it becomes clear like, oh, that's why they did that shot in the premiere, but it's stupid because it makes no sense, because why would Chief do that? Why would the assault rifles have Spartan numbers drawn on them like everyone has their own vanity weapons? Like, who gives a fuck? Like, am I meant to believe that Master Chief before a mission is like stomping around the armory looking for his specific assault rifle? Like, he would just grab anyone off the rack, right? So yeah, the assault trifle shot was dumb. But in terms of overall structure of the opening scene, I found it predictable yet effective, which is why it was predictable. Because I thought, well, that's what you would do probably if you were going to make a show like this, like, and this is how you kick it off, right? Like in terms of broad beats, right? It's like human outpost, bad guy on a little TV, introduced to the humans, discussion about the Spartans, how big and scary they are, kids out in the woods, they get attacked by something, kids run back to the outpost, brace for a fight, there's some explosions, humans get killed, oh no, what is it? Boom, reveal the Covenant, kill a bunch of humans, you see how dangerous and scary they are, overwhelm the humans, all hope is lost, boom, pelican in the sky, Chief comes down, kills all the aliens, you see what he's capable of. Good way of introducing Chief in media res, in combat. Like, I think the skeleton of that makes for a pretty effective opening scene for Halo. And when the opening scene finished, it was a bit long, lasts like 20 minutes. And it's like, okay, I can get on board with this. The action is okay. It's certainly watchable. So near that fight scene where that happens, there's a Covenant ship that was mining for an artifact buried in the ground or something in a cave, and Chief and Silver Team, his Spartans, they find it. Chief touches the MacGuffin. He gets a bunch of visions, Mass Effect style, but in the case of Chief, they're like flashbacks to his childhood, and he's like scribbling drawings, and I found it a bit cliche. There's an alien that sees Chief interact with the artifact, and then the Spartans see him, and the alien runs away, and he uses a cloaking device to get away. A bunch of people, I guess, thought that was Arbiter, that they were setting up Arbiter there, but I don't think it is. But I think that's what they should have done. Like, I don't think McKee or Quan should have been in the show as much as Arbiter. I think he would have been perfect to set up in season 1 and start off that like dual narrative thing between the humans and the aliens, like, you know, do that ASAP, and then you can spend time developing both characters, and that's what made Halo 2 so narratively compelling. So like, if you're gonna do the Halo TV series where you're splitting multiple storylines across multiple main characters, why the fuck wouldn't you have Arbiter there, you know? So we can see the alien side of things, but then I guess that ups the budget by X millions of dollars because the VFX involved in making a bunch more aliens, right? And if you're going to do Arbiter in a whole bunch of shots, Like, presumably, if they're going to do Arbiter, he's going to be, like, CG constantly. So that's going to make the production a lot more complicated. And maybe, I guess they wanted to keep things relatively simple for the first season of production, at least. So they decided, what human characters can we cast alternatively? And they did this McKee character on the alien side of things, and they have the Quan character on, like, the human rebellion side of things. And then you got Chief on, like, the military front. And you kind of get this portrait of the whole universe, the show's timeline, universe, world, whatever, illustrated by the perspectives of each of these 3 points. We get introduced to Catherine Halsey, who not only do I like the actress in this show who plays Catherine, but I've always really just liked that character, Catherine Halsey, as somebody who is legitimately torn between being this mother figure to a bunch of children who have grown up to be these, like, hulking warriors, and now she has all this power at her fingertips, but it's like she's kind of playing this sensitive role to them where they see her like a mother figure, like I said. It's almost like a Splinter and his Ninja Turtle sort of relationship. And so on the one hand, she's that, but then she's also this kind of diabolical person who thinks the ends justify the means and is willing to do whatever it takes to win the war against the Covenant and ensure that humanity comes out on top. And in the games, it didn't feel like it was trying to make her out to be one thing or the other. Like, there was a preserved duality to that character where you can see both sides of her personality kind of at war with each other. But in this show, it kind of feels like they're leaning towards the side of her just being a villain, this, like, reprehensible person who doesn't really care about anybody except humanity as a collective. Like, her worldview is really weird. Like, she goes into some detail in the show about her worldview, and she's like, she sees, like, she says she loves humanity, but she says humans are the problem. And I guess that's supposed to come off as, like, one of those things that's, like, profound in its simplicity, but you analyze it and it's just like, that's kind of stupid, you know, because humanity is humans. Like, what do you mean? Like, what do you think humanity is? If you like humanity, you respect the humanity presumably in individuals, right? If you love humanity. So do you not understand what makes people human? And she wants to, like, pursue this utopian world without conflict, and she thinks, I guess, that humans can be engineered to live in this perfect society where nobody's conflicting with one another. But I don't think that really demonstrates an understanding of what it means to be human and the inherent nature of conflict to being alive, really. Not just human beings, but, like, the universe is comprised of things that are constantly at odds and at war with each other. You know, like night and day and fire and water and, you know, all these elements, you know, empty space and matter and gravity and lack of gravity, and, like, there's all these forces at play in existence. And I feel like it's too naive to believe that you can build this utopian world like Halsey believes, and I think she would be smarter than that. I don't really know what she wants in the show, because she seems to be, like, happy at really odd moments, like when Chief and Quan escape the UNSC with the artifact, but she's, like, smiling because Chief is going against orders, but she really wants the artifact there to study it. So wouldn't she be more upset by the fact that the artifact is going away than the fact that Chief is, like, I mean, why is she even happy that she wants Chief to disobey orders? Like, she hasn't even integrated Cortana with him at this point. So, like, I feel like her goals are inconsistent. I'm not sure if it's something that I'm missing because I'm forgetting something, or it's just the writing wasn't really that thought out. So Chief secures the artifact, and Quan is, like, the sole survivor of the fight at the outpost, I guess, and then they're both on the ship. and Chief is just like sitting staring at the artifact because it's like affected him in some way, but we're not really sure. And this is kind of a problem with the show, right? Because like the only thing, we don't know what the artifact has done to him to change his behavior, right? So like, because we haven't seen enough of Chief. The show just started, right? And all we've seen of Chief so far is him fighting, and then he finds the artifact, right? So we know, like, before the artifact, he was an efficient warrior and like competent, not a droid. There was still like some humanity in him, but it's just, he's just an efficient human warrior, right? And then he finds the artifact, interacts with it, and then there's all these like things that Chief does, and you're not sure as an audience member if he's doing them because of the intervention of the artifact or because he's always been this way, right? So I feel like what the show should have done is spent a little more time fleshing out Chief beyond just combat, and then the artifact comes in, and then like all the behavior that follows that moment stands out more, and it's like it's clear as to like what is a result of the artifact and what isn't. And something felt off to me with Chief right when Chief started sighing. He's like, I think it's in the scene where he's like sitting down staring at the artifact on the ground, and he's just like, ugh. It's like, I don't think I've ever heard Chief sigh in any of the games. Like it was just really odd to me, because Chief, I feel like one of the traits that you can extract from his pattern of behavior across the games is that he's very composed. He doesn't lose composure. And him sighing is a signal of a lack of composure to a degree, right? I was thinking it would be hilarious if he like had his helmet off at this point and he was just like sitting there smoking a cigarette. Just like, these goddamn fucking aliens. I swear to Christ, if I see one more alien, I'm gonna fucking lose my shit. Chief has a conversation with Quan. She's eating something, and he's sitting there, and I think she asks what he eats, and he says nuts, bolts, and microchips. So he's cracking a joke about the fact that he comes off to people as robotic because I guess he has his helmet on a lot of the time. Until now, for some reason, where he's taking it off every fucking chance he gets. And again, this ties to the issue I brought up before with what behavior as a result of the artifact and what isn't. So we don't know enough about Chief to know how to read this joke telling. Like, is he telling a joke because he's like been opened up to like humor because of the artifact now, or has he always had a sense of humor? And if he's always had a sense of humor, why throughout the rest of the entire first season is he so inconsistent and humorless with the joke telling? You know what I mean? Like he does this first joke, and then there's like a stretch of episodes where he's like utterly humorless. I don't think he makes a single other joke until episode 5 when the fight scene starts and he says these like comedic one-liners like, mind if I drive? And he's like pulling the grunt out of the driver's seat of the Warthog that's in motion. And I like setting up that sense of humor because Chief does have a sense of humor. If you play the games again and you watch the cutscenes, there's jokes everywhere, and the banter between Chief and Cortana is actually pretty hilarious, like well-written jokes. And so it makes sense to set up his sense of humor here in this show. So I like that he told that joke. But if that's a consistent trait of his, you'd think he'd be a bit more skilled at it, where Quan wouldn't kind of, comment on the awkward delivery, where it's just like she knows he's joking, but I guess he's saying it in such a flat, deadpan, serious way that it's not convincing that it's a joke. But I don't really know what was going on there, whether she knew it was a joke or she was just off-put by the way he said it, because I think the deadpan was the point and part of the humor for Chief. But I don't know. But the bigger issue is that the show doesn't give him that sense of humor for stretches of episodes, and then he starts making jokes again in episode 5, at like the most inappropriate time, really, because it's in the middle of combat. But I understand you want to make the fight scenes fun. But then another stretch of episodes where he's just not making any jokes, totally humorless. And then in the finale, he has a beat with Cortana where Cortana makes a joke and Chief smiles and he appreciates the joke that she made. And I'm like, that's great. But where has this sense of humor been throughout the rest of the season? Like, be consistent with it, right? This also feeds into why I think the showrunners didn't really know what they were doing fully with the Master Chief character. It's like, if we're giving him this arc of like being kind of a, machine who discovers his humanity, maybe he shouldn't have a sense of humor at the start, right? And maybe he should develop a sense of humor as he goes. But then what made him make that joke in the pilot episode? I'm not really sure. It's not clear. So Kwan is on the ship, the Pelican, the Chief is on, and Kwan is in her own little separate cell, and she has this talk with Miranda Keyes via hologram. Miranda's like projected so Kwan can see her, and they have a conversation, and Miranda wants, I think, Kwan to just speak candidly about what happened at the outpost in order to, like, boost morale, I guess, and encourage hostility towards the Covenant and increase their likelihood of winning future fights or something. And Kwan doesn't want to do it because she doesn't want to help the UNSC because the UNSC like screwed them over. And then the UNSC like deem her a threat to the security of the species, I guess, and they want to kill her, which seems like a pretty drastic move to like go to as like a first. It's just like, oh, she's not cooperating, better kill her. This child who hasn't done anything wrong. Really? You have so little qualm about that you're just going to do it? And Miranda Keyes has this conversation with Jacob Keyes, is that his name? And I quite like the dynamic those two characters have, because like Jacob Keyes is obviously this guy who has seen war up close. He's been in it. He's been in the fight for a long time. And then he has this young daughter who's like kind of filling big shoes in her more administrative role, I guess. But like she wants to participate more in the fight, and the father wants to kind of shield her from that. Like, he respects her willingness to fight in the war, but as a father doesn't want her to be affected by war in the way that he has. Like, I think he's been damaged by the war, and he doesn't want the same for his daughter. So I like that dynamic that they have. I just have kind of an issue with the UNSC taking a measure as drastic as killing this child so quickly. And I feel like the show is going out of its way a bit to villainize the UNSC in a way that the games never really did. In the games, the UNSC is pretty much like, we're the good guys and the aliens are the bad guys and we're fighting the aliens. And but I understand for television you want to make things a bit more morally complicated, and there's obviously going to be an inclination to have the UNSC mirror the kind of American war machine, I guess, and make a comment on contemporary, military force and politics. It feels like a bit too much too soon. So in the pilot episode of Halo, Chief reveals his face controversially early. People were like, is it too soon? Should this happen in season 1? Should it happen at all? Maybe we should never see Pablo's face. But I honestly, I didn't expect the show to keep Chief's helmet on 100% of the time. Like, I'm fine with him taking his helmet off now and then, but it should make sense, Like, don't take your helmet off in a hazardous situation where you could be exposing yourself to a headshot, and don't take the helmet off when it would be valuable to preserve the inflow of diagnostic and, environment analysis data coming through the helmet. to inform Chief. Like, you would want all that information in front of you most of the time, right? Like on the visor. But I do understand, like, as a human being wearing a helmet, sometimes you just want to, like, oh, okay, I got to take this off for a bit and just breathe fresh air and not, oxygen contained in the suit in a separate tank or whatever. He does it to put Quan at ease, because Quan is holding a gun to Chief, and he wants to show her that he's just a human being under the shell, which makes sense, I guess, but I don't know. It does feel too soon to me. And given the arc that I thought the showrunners were going by for Chief, it would actually make sense for him to keep his helmet on longer, or like to postpone the face reveal till later. Because if his arc is a discovery of his humanity, maybe he shouldn't take his helmet off right off the bat. Maybe you want to have a few episodes where it's just like, is there a human being under there? Like, have a little play with that ambiguity for a while, and then maybe halfway through the season his helmet comes off. Eventually the UNSC gets big mad because Chief's not doing what he's told, because he's being all weird now because of the artifact, and the UNSC decides to, like, drain the oxygen out of his suit, because I guess they have remote control over Chief's suit's oxygen supply. But then, if they have that, why wouldn't they be able to just lock the suit completely so it can't be moved? Any of the joints can't move. You just lock the suit down, Why wouldn't you engineer the suit to do that? And the answer's obvious, because by draining the oxygen instead, the writers then have an opportunity to write Chief doing something to save himself and Quan in the limited window of time he has between the oxygen drain initiating and him not being able to breathe anymore. So you can play with that, the tension within that window of time of him, like, trying to do something. And he does. He, like, pulls off a panel in the ship that's, like, conveniently located right next to him as he's passing out, which is like, okay, isn't that convenient, right? And so the Pelican lands at the UNSC base, and they're all, like, standing outside with their guns drawn. They're waiting for Chief and Quan to come out with the artifact, and the Pelican is knocked out by an EMP blast, I think. So there's no power running through it, but then the power is restored by the artifact, which has the ability to just basically generate plot and do whatever the script demands. Whether it's starting a ship that's knocked out by an EMP, or creating convenient shockwaves that only blow away unwanted characters from a scene, or just giving characters certain flashbacks, whatever they need to see to drive the plot to the next scene that the writers have conjured. Like, it's all just in service of the script, and it just kind of sucks. Because you basically just have this object that can do whatever the plot demands. It kind of sucks you out of it, right? So the artifact starts the ship. Quan and Chief get away. Halsey is happy for some reason, even though she really wants the artifact. She's, like, happy that Chief is running away and has no sign of, like, ever coming back. So I don't know really what she's happy about. I'm not really sure what her goal is in that instance. But anyway.